Hi guys, in today's video I'm going to be giving my 10 top tips if you're thinking of getting into the buy-to-let investment market. First of all, let me just quickly introduce myself. My name's Gary and I run this channel Free Your Finance. I'm documenting my journey towards financial independence. I talk about investing, property and savings, so if this sounds like something you may be interested in watching a little more about, please hit the subscribe button below. So, over the last 12 years I've built a portfolio of buy-to-let properties. By no means am I saying I'm a property expert, but I've certainly had a little bit of experience in the market. In that time, I've come across many obstacles and regulations and rules have changed quite a few times. I'm hoping in today's video, I can give you some tips and things to think about before you jump in headfirst to buy-to-let investing. So number one is do your research. I know this sounds so obvious, but it's really important you learn all about the buy-to-let market before you go and view a property. Now, I think you're already probably doing this tip because you're here watching this video. There are many things you need to take into consideration before buying a buy-to-let property, such as the safety aspect of buy-to-lets. So you will need to do things like gas safety testing, electrical testing. You'll need to make sure deposits are stored in the correct locations. You'll need to make sure that obviously your property is a safe environment for the tenant to live. You even need to consider what would happen if things go wrong, and maybe you need to go down the route of evictions. This can be very costly and something personally I think you need to know about before you get into buy-to-lets. Lots of people think we buy a house, we put a tenant in there and it's happy ever after, which is not always the case. So I'd really recommend you spend a little bit of time doing the research. Tip number two, think about your costs. So the obvious cost is the property price, but there are a lot more costs that you're going to incur. You've got to think about stamp duty, you've got to think about the cost for your solicitor, you've even got to think about the purchase costs and refurbishment costs. These all stack up, and obviously where it is an investment, you've got to treat it like a business. If once you've got your property you decide to have it managed, you're even going to have the costs involved of doing that. So all of these costs you've got to think about, as they are ultimately going to affect your bottom line. Don't forget, we're treating this like a business and hopefully we're going to make money from it. Number three, you've got to think about the location of the property. Now, I personally recommend buying properties in locations that you know. You will know the good areas and you'll know the bad areas to avoid. This is really useful information when buying an investment property, as obviously you want to attract good tenants that are going to look after your property, which is also going to look after your profits. Lots of investors are now heading north and buying properties in places such as Liverpool, as this area has really fantastic returns on investment. Now, I'm not too far from London and I'm a little bit worried about having a property 4 or 5 hours away up in Liverpool. I self-manage and I love the fact that I'm close to my properties and can be there within 10 to 15 minutes if there's a problem. If I bought a property up in Liverpool, I'd have to have it managed professionally. So you would need to make sure you get a good managing agent, and of course this is going to be another cost for you to consider. Number four, make sure you know your sums. So as I've mentioned many times before on this channel, buy-to-let property has got to be treated as an investment. So it's important you think with your head and not your heart. I know what it's like. You walk into a stunning property that you could really imagine yourself living in, but this doesn't necessarily mean it's a great investment. Now, of course, to a certain extent, you're going to want an attractive property that attracts good tenants that are going to be happy and want to stay for a long time. However, you've also got to consider that maybe you're going to have to pay top money for this property. This may mean that this property is not the best investment for you. Lots of landlords recommend buying freehold properties so you don't have charges such as service charges and ground rents to consider. However, if you do buy a leasehold property, don't forget to consider these costs. Number five, unless you've got a stash of cash hiding under the bed, you're probably going to need a mortgage. Most landlords go for interest-only mortgages for two main reasons really. Number one, it decreases your monthly payments. This increases your cash flow and helps to pay for things like maintenance, damages, and hopefully pays us a small profit too. You can also use this money that you're building to buy another property or invest elsewhere. The second thing that makes interest-only mortgages great is that inflation eats up your debt for you. Let's say I bought a property 30 years ago with a £50,000 debt on an interest-only mortgage. That £50,000 then was worth a lot more than it is now, and now is when you've got to pay it off. Of course, the downside to that is you are then paying interest on the full balance for the whole term of your mortgage. So whereas with a repayment mortgage, your interest would be slowly reducing, with interest only, your interest stays the same. Number six, think about your customer. So if you're buying a house that you're hoping to attract a family in, then there's a good chance a family may have a young child and they're going to require a bath. If you're buying a property for students, I would suggest something easy to maintain. They're going to be busy with their studies, and when they're not studying, there's a good chance they may well be partying. So that's another thing you need to consider. There's no point putting in hundreds of pounds worth of expensive furniture when there's a good chance chance they're going to be playing beer pong on your table. Number 7, you've got to think about how you're going to manage your property. So the two main ways you can do this is you can use a managing agent, or like me, you can manage it yourself. The advantages of using a managing agent, especially when you're new, is of course they know what they're doing and they have all the latest documents and rules that are going to be required. The disadvantage of using a managing agent is of course it comes with a cost. Now when I use managing agents, I paid around 5%. However, I did negotiate this price as I had multiple properties. I believe the going rate is around 10%. However, I have been out of the managing agent market for quite a while, so I'm not up to date on that. The other disadvantage of managing agents is ultimately you're just a small fish in their quite large pond, in my opinion. They're managing maybe hundreds if not thousands of properties, and personally my experience of managing agents is sometimes the service can be a little lackluster. I'm sure this can be resolved by finding a great managing agent that's going to look after you. The second way you can manage your property is doing it yourself. Now this is easier than you think, and it's something I'm really glad I moved over to. I use OpenRent to help me manage my properties myself. I'm going to put a link to OpenRent in the description box of this video. If you use that link, you will get a free premium listing worth £29. Now OpenRent are sort of like an online estate agent where you do it yourself. You can advertise your property and they will help you with the whole process from start to finish with a service that they call Rent Now. This will go through everything you need to know, and it gives you helpful hints and tips throughout the way, reminding you to get things like the EPC sorted, and it can even help you getting the contract set up and the deposit and the first month's rent taken. If you're thinking of going the self-managed route, go and check out my channel now, as I have loads more videos discussing how to do it. Number 8, consider opening a bank account for your property. I know this sounds really tiny, but I think it will make things really helpful for you. It gets all the money coming in and out all in the same place, and it keeps it easy to track. If you're anything like me, you may find it helpful to have a bit of a float in that account so that when you do need money to pay for any maintenance issues or anything like that, the money is there readily available. Have an amount that you would like to always keep in that account, and if you start building an amount larger than this, you can then draw it out and use it for another investment. Number 9, keep up with your paperwork. Obviously, where you're going to be earning money, you need to declare this to HMRC, so it's important you keep up to date with any paperwork, banking and receipts. I personally have created an Excel spreadsheet where I keep track of all the money in and all the money out, and at the end of the year I give it to my accountant to sort out. I personally am really happy that I have an accountant to sort all this out for me, as it's a stress that I just don't want to deal with. And then finally, tip number 10 is don't get emotional. Now, as much as I know you're going to want to give a great service to your tenant, it's important that you realise that this is ultimately a business. Yes, you want to look after your tenants, but at the same time there is a fine line. So they were my 10 tips if you're thinking of getting into buy-to-let property. If you would like to see more videos like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. If you found the video helpful, please do hit the thumbs up. It really helps me and a small channel like mine grow. Hopefully I'll see you guys really soon. Take care.